Let's flash back to earlier this year. When rumors of a portable gaming machine from Valve started circulating, I put together a small wish list of what I think they would need to be successful, and I talked about that with close friends. The list seemed ambitious, but reasonable. How many of those boxes has Valve checked, and how many are yet to be covered? The answer would have surprised me. Let's see if it would have surprised you too. What's good, Deck Gang? This is a fun video I've been thinking about for some time. I've been wanting to talk about the things that I think Valve needs in order to be successful with a console like this. In order to do so, I also dive into a little recent history to give context. Overall, this has been a joy to write and to make. Let's get into it. Before the Steam Deck was announced, we heard rumors of a SteamPal, or more humorously, a Gabe Gear, or Gabe Boy. Our first hint came in May 2021. Coincidentally, this matches the date in which the On Deck Twitter account was first created, as I reported back in my Deck Verified video. Well, back in May, as reported by Tech Radar at the time, Gabe had a Q&A session with some students at Santa Maria College in Auckland, New Zealand. Here's the student's question and Gabe's answer.
Will Steam be porting any games to consoles, or will it just stay on PC?
You will get a better idea of that by the end of this year.
Good idea.
So this snippet was reported as something to do with Steam and consoles, but we didn't know what, except that maybe the revelation of what would surprise us. That said, there were some folks like Gardner Bryant who had an inkling of what this actually meant. Gardner posted a video within a week with the title, "Is Gabe talking about a new Steam console?" In retrospect, of course, we all know that he was. Then, in the same month, came data mining leaks of something called Neptune, and later SteamPal, and that's when the story was broken wide open. Ars Technica's headline read, "Exclusive, Valve is making a Switch-like portable gaming PC." So at this point, the speculation games began, and as we are all aware, I will entertain speculation. So I came up with a wish list, or more accurately, what a best case scenario would look like for consumers, and therefore Valve. Here's what I said at the time. Number 1, retool SteamOS to be more user-friendly and capable. Number 2, they would need to sell the console at a loss. Hopefully they could rely on their 30% cut from store sales in order to partially offset that, despite the fact that PC is an open platform and theoretically players can buy their games from anywhere. Number 3, they should have first-party accessories like a dock, new Steam controller, keyboard, and mouse. By having dedicated accessories, they could sidestep any driver issues, as well as help further offset the cost of the console. Furthermore, finding accessories is a pain. Having a trusted go-to source for consumers would really benefit everyone. And finally, the last thing on my hit list, number 4, I said they would need to work with developers to ensure great performance on Proton. At the time, I was fairly naive with regard to Proton, so I didn't necessarily know everything that this entailed, but I had heard stories from friends who tried Proton and knew that there were still issues to be ironed out. With those 4 ambitious but reasonable points, I thought this would allow them to reach a $500 to $600 price point with a very wide selection of playable games. Oh, I forgot one item from my wish list. It says here that I also wish for you to like the video if you like the video, and hit subscribe if you want more Steam Deck and PC gaming content. I'm here every Friday and most Mondays, but slap the bell if you just want to be notified when a new video arrives. In any case, we know Valve basically hit every one of the points on my list. I'd still like to see more in accessories, especially a Steam Controller 2.0, but we'll get into that later in the video. What I want to do now is establish an even more ambitious checklist and talk further about the boxes they've already ticked on that list. So let's start with that. What have they already accomplished? Back in 2013, Valve announced SteamOS and Steam machines. We know that Steam's single largest dependency is the Windows operating system. If Windows decided to not allow traditional executables to work anymore, Valve would have to scramble to keep Steam in business. That fear felt especially pronounced as Microsoft unveiled its own Microsoft Windows Store with Windows 8. SteamOS was Valve's answer to this fear, and in order to get people to use it, Steam machines would be the Trojan horse. The Steam machines were pre-built PCs coming from various manufacturers with SteamOS installed. Obviously, the Steam machine concept was a flop. There's no shortage of reasons why Steam machines failed, but mostly SteamOS wasn't quite ready. Most of the Steam library wasn't playable on Linux. Before Proton, this was a chicken and egg problem. You couldn't get devs to make Linux ports if people didn't run Linux, and you couldn't get people to run Linux if there weren't any ports. So Valve took it upon themselves to fix this problem. They were going to single-handedly make almost the entire library of Steam games playable on Linux. In August 2018, they announced Proton. Side note, saying they did this single-handedly is not entirely accurate and likely does disservice to the contributors of the project. There are at least 56 people who have contributed to the Proton codebase. I don't know for sure, but I would guess they're not all Valve employees. Furthermore, that doesn't count anyone else that has contributed to this effort directly or indirectly, even if it wasn't through code. In any case, as I said, Valve announced Proton in 2018. A little over 3 years later, we are approaching a point where we can be confident that 80% of Steam's library of over 50,000 games that are playable on any given version of Windows are also playable on Linux. That would have been unfathomable to me 3 years ago. By all accounts, Valve is a very rich, privately owned company. They have the means to do something like this, but the fact that they actually went and did it is at least a little bit astonishing. Of course, since the announcement of the Steam Deck, they've also committed to and made good on the commitment to get anti-cheat services on board. With regard to compatibility, they seem like they know what their biggest hurdles are, and they continue to clear them systematically. I think that another problem with Steam machines was that there wasn't a single SKU, or more accurately, a single target hardware. As we'll see later, this could resurface as a problem in the future of SteamOS adaptation. Even as Linux has become an extremely viable gaming platform, PC players and console players alike are not convinced that it's a suitable choice for them. Enter the single target hardware. For the deck to really go mainstream, you have to make a genuine effort at attracting console players. And by having a single target, you start to give those players something analogous to what they have today. You simplified the landscape and reduced the number of choices that a player has to make. If you want to know more about what a console player expects and how it differs from what a PC player expects, make sure to check out my video about what to expect from PC gaming. But mostly, it boils down to the fact that console players find too many options to be a burden rather than a freedom. A single target hardware takes the burden away. Additionally, you give developers the same exact thing. They can be convinced that this single spec combination will sell well and that it's therefore worth targeting. On top of that, Proton makes it so that their targeting efforts don't have to be terribly costly. Most of the work has already been done for them. What's remaining are the type of things I covered in the Deck Verified video, like target resolution, readable fonts, and seamless input. Things that would be helpful to virtually any game on any platform. Last but not least, this helps reduce costs. Valve themselves can strike up deals with chip makers, board makers, and more. The assembly cost is further reduced. You don't have to account for as many variations as PC builders do. Even a single line of laptops from a PC manufacturer will have dozens to hundreds of permutations, allowing you to customize nearly everything, including memory, to hard drive size, CPU, GPU, and even the quality of the display. This has a huge labor cost associated with it. Meanwhile, the Steam Deck only has 3 different permutations, and this is based on 2 components that might be different, either the storage or the display. Anyone that is familiar with PCs is astonished that Valve was able to get to a $399 price point. Even accounting for taking a loss, they had to find every reasonable place to cut costs, and focusing on a single target was one such way. Smartphones changed everything about gaming, and not in the way that so many futurists expected. Futurists thought that no one would want an Xbox or PlayStation, and instead they would simply game on their iPhone or Android. This reminds me of how the space race gave us so many technological benefits like freeze-dried foods, memory foam, and LED lighting. But actually, reaching the moon is not technologically significant to how we live our lives in 2021. Obviously, smartphones are very significant to how we live our lives, but as far as gaming goes, they did not usurp consoles in the least. They did, however, help accelerate the manufacture of small and efficient systems on a chip. These systems on a chip, or SoCs, differ from traditional computers in that they are a complete processing system in one package. That means CPU, GPU, image processing, neural processing, modems, and more. The GPU is a key component here, and I don't think it's simply because Apple and Google wanted people to play games on their phones. That seems more like an excellent side benefit. The intended benefits were probably things like fast image processing, think Instagram, video processing, encoding and decoding, think live streaming, live video manipulation, think Snapchat, and of course, augmented reality. These monumental developments dovetailed alongside Nintendo's obsession with hybrid gaming. The Wii U was ahead of its time, but thankfully only slightly. Unlike Virtual Boy, Nintendo was only years away from getting the tools it needed to fulfill their vision. They partnered with Nvidia for a console that would use a smartphone-like system on a chip to bring high-definition 3D gaming on the go with the Switch. The rest has been history in the making, with the Switch being one of the fastest-selling consoles ever. All the while, there's been an ongoing effort from small, hobbyist PC manufacturers to make a portable gaming PC. Things like GPD-1.1 and GPD-Win 2 both existed before the Switch, but were only for a dedicated few. games ran poorly, and required extreme tweaking. The devices themselves also had build issues. The Switch gave this movement of renewed energy and faith that their goal was within reach. And starting in 2020, handheld gaming PCs saw 4 new competitive models in quick succession. The GPD-Win Max, followed by the GPD-Win 3, as well as the Aya Neo and the One X Player. So by the time the rumors of a Steam Deck came around, we knew it was possible because we'd already been seeing it for months. I've talked a lot about attracting console gamers, but a portable option also attracts PC players. It gives them a reason to buy something they did not build themselves, and it gives them a reason to buy something new when they may already have the latest and greatest. Okay, for the next few, I don't have a long history attached, so they'll be relatively brief. Next up on the extra ambitious wish list is serviceability. Valve checked this one off with the teardown video. PC game players are used to serviceability, and console players will likely need some level of this as well. Joysticks will drift, buttons will stick, displays may get cracked, and batteries will age. This doesn't have to be done by the consumer to be helpful. They may be a part of the warranty service or even be repairs that can be done at a third-party repair shop. Valve needs to quickly establish themselves as a reputable device maker, and having serviceable devices helps set them apart from the competition. Verification processes are standard in the console world. Once again, they give players a level of confidence that the game they are playing meets a minimum standard. This is doubly needed because the console manufacturers also have a customer service department that will be fielding calls from customers with issues. If a game hard crashes more than once, Sony will either start getting tweets demanding a patch or support calls wondering what's happening with the console. The verification process adds some cost up front to reduce significantly more costs to both their reputation and pocketbook on the back end. A process like that is a lot less common on PC. It's much harder to accomplish given the variety of everyone's hardware, but also there's no single company to call when something goes wrong. Valve, for example, would much sooner give you a full refund rather than try to determine why a game isn't working on your specific machine. With the Steam Deck, the calculus of that changes to some extent. They've hired a team of people to test games. Given the backlog of games that they're starting with, it's possible that they never verify every single game on Steam. But as time goes on, the library of verified and playable games will only grow. This gives players a level of confidence that is going to be needed if you want to A. convince console players to buy a PC, and B. convince PC players to buy a Linux machine. So that covers everything on my extra ambitious wish list that Valve has already accomplished. Let's talk about some things I'd still like to see. First up is a follow-up to the Steam controller. The current Steam controller has been discontinued since 2019, so the aftermarket prices have continually risen since then. I think that demand would skyrocket once players start docking their Steam Decks and lose the trackpads. Most will be using Xbox controllers, so they'll also lose gyro functionality. Overall, they'd have a lot fewer inputs when docked compared to handheld. I imagine that Valve wants users to have the option to have input parity when docked, and a new Steam controller would do just that. For what it's worth, there are patents floating around that imply it's something that they have continued to look into. And honestly, I expect it's one of the next announcements we'll be hearing about soon. But until then, it's still on my wish list. Valve, are you listening? One of my biggest gripes with Steam so far has been customer support. Thankfully, things like their generous refund policy make it so that you don't need a representative very often. But of course, that will change with a whole new player base, a machine that Valve is responsible for, and games that Valve will be responsible for verifying. For what it's worth, Valve has made major strides with customer service, but again, the volume is about to go up significantly. I hope they have properly staffed for this, and I'm the sort of weird person that would actually love to hear them talk about that a bit. The number one complaint I've seen in my comments when it comes to the Steam Deck is that there has been no official communication about worldwide distribution. As of right now, it's still only available to reserve in the US, UK, Canada, and the EU. Furthermore, the reservations in those regions have stretched to a very ambiguous after Q2 2022. And of course, they continue to take reservations, but not for Australia, Africa, Asia, South America, and more. Even rumors and speculation don't offer much solace here. All we have so far is this article from a Russian gaming magazine confirming that Buka Entertainment says they're in negotiations with Valve to distribute in Russia. Buka Entertainment is a Russian PC game distributor that have apparently worked with Valve in the past distributing Steam controller in that region. What's worse is that this could drive scalping prices sky high and undo some of the goodwill that Valve gained with a reservation system that appeared relatively fair compared to the retail lottery we see with console releases. So the rest of the world lives on a hope and a prayer that Valve will somehow be working with local distributors to bring this machine to their country. This is something that Valve needs to address pretty urgently, as potential customers grow restless and wary that they may not be able to get their hands on a Steam Deck until 2023, completely killing any hype in those unrepresented regions. Another thing I think that Valve has to consider is the future of Deck Verified. Console gamers come from a place where they don't have to think about if a specific game supports cloud saves or not. They don't need to worry about which games have achievements or trophies. And they don't even have to worry about what DRM means. Steam is a marketplace full of rich features that game developers can choose to use or not use. Can these features be worked into the future of Deck Verified, where you know a seal of approval means that a specific feature set will be available for a game? Or what happens when a Steam Deck 2 or Steam console is released? Do the Deck Verified requirements jump from 800p at 30 frames per second to 1080p, 1400p? The Deck Verified program feels very specific to, well, the Deck, or rather the current iteration of it. Valve has also made clear that they would love competitors in this space, stating that it benefits everyone. Can Razer feel compelled to make a SteamOS based handheld if they couldn't guarantee that the Deck Verified checkmark applied to their own hardware? How will the Verified program carry over to future PC consoles? This is not a question that has to be answered now, but I suspect it will have to be answered soon, because just like there was a wave of handheld gaming PCs coming from small manufacturers after the Switch, the Steam Deck is likely going to cause a tsunami of handheld gaming PCs from the likes of Razer, Logitech, Asus, Acer, and Dell. On that note, don't be surprised when Microsoft gets in on the action. They're not going to care about being Deck Verified or anything like that. Instead, it'll be branded as a portable Xbox or portable Game Pass machine. Either way, the landscape is going to become very crowded very quickly. The final item on my Steam Deck wishlist is that they hone their messaging and marketing. Part of marketing is to get people excited, and they've done that part extremely well. But there's also the matter of setting correct expectations and finding the right audience, and I can't say that they've done an A+ job of that so far. They've already made a few mistakes in my eyes. First, they've said that every game on Steam would be playable. Savvy PC players took that as either a mistake or as an ideal state, one that Valve would like to get to one day. We did not take that as a promise that every game or nearly every game would be playable at launch, despite the hardware itself being relatively capable. The Deck Verified program is itself proof that every game will not be playable at launch, much less ideal. On the other side of this, we have people wondering why the big multiplayer games are still not Proton compatible, despite the announcements thus far. And we are getting major recent releases like New World, Guardians of the Galaxy, and Age of Empires 4 that are completely unplayable on Proton. Furthermore, I think people are expecting that Valve will be able to rate all Steam games within a year for whether or not they are playable or verified. And I think that Valve is partly responsible for people believing this. They did not set any expectations. They left it wildly open to interpretation. Finally, there's the teardown. In my Teardown Revisited video, I mentioned the confusing tone in Valve's teardown. Now, on the one hand, this is the one time Valve sort of couched expectations with the Steam Deck. But on the other hand, I feel the messaging was again left unclear. The actual target audience of the video were the tinkerers, and in my eyes they were given more of a dog whistle that it's okay to service their device rather than full support. In these instances of what I perceive to be unclear messaging, I think that Valve hopes to leave everyone excited about the Steam Deck regardless of who they are and how they game. While that sounds like a sensible goal, it leaves a lot of room for disappointment from people that inferred things like every game will be playable or you will have everything you need to repair your device. That room for disappointment could lead to poor word of mouth in the first few months of release. A rocky start stemming from unclear messaging would be a serious unforced error on Valve's part, and I think that they can avoid it if they start tightening their messaging a bit. So that's my extra ambitious wish list with a dash of Steam Deck history. What's missing from my list? Maybe something about emulation? Let me know in the comments. For what it's worth, this has been one of my harder efforts in terms of research and writing, so if you think I did a good job, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you want more content around Steam Deck, PC gaming, and tech, make sure to subscribe. There's a news video coming on Friday, but slap the bell so you don't miss a thing. And not to be redundant, but if you made it this far, you are a real one. And you may have heard this before. Like and subscribe, slap the bell to get notified. Tell a friend it's a vibe. That gang out. Goodbye.